Hello everybody, I hope everybody is having a great day today. So I want to do a quick video breaking down my music production process. Quick shout out to Joe for the suggestion, but I do apologize, this is not a tutorial, this is more of a breakdown and tips and tricks video for those who want to get started. I don't feel like I'm competent enough to do a full-on tutorial, not to mention it would take a very long time to do a full-on tutorial, given all the components that go into music production. But here's a quick breakdown. So starting off with gear. I am using the Studio 68C as my audio interface. It's a great audio interface, and if you get it, I believe you get a trial version of Studio One. I think it's called Studio One Artist, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I use Studio One Professional. It's basically the same as Artist, just upgraded and has more features. On top of that, I also use the Line 6 Helix. This is what I plug into my audio interface to get cool sounds into the DAW. And as for mics, I use the Shure SM7B. And that is the mic I use for any vocals, as well as to record my audio for this recording right here. So I will go ahead and go over my preset real quick, the one that I use for recording most of my music. I'm just going to hover over each one of these blocks so you can see it. If you have a Line 6 Helix, you can try to copy this if you'd so like. Okay, now that we've gone over all of those, let's hop over to my DAW, Studio One Pro. So here's where things generally get interesting and where my competence goes down significantly, to be honest. I haven't been doing my own music for very long, and there are tons of tutorials out there on how to get good at mixing and recording music. So I'm not going to go over that as much as I will just go over some of the tricks that I've learned, as well as going over some songwriting techniques as well as layering techniques. So I have the Aeromancy cover here. It's got quite a few tracks here, but we will break down some of these the best we can. So the most notable examples of what I mean by layering are in the guitars and in the vocals. As you can see up here, there are 11 vocal tracks, which is a lot of vocals. But this is just to make it sound big. Obviously, generally speaking, you're not going to have 11 vocalists on the stage all singing at the same time. And so one technique to have the vocals sound big is to have the lead vocal just panned in the center. Let me pull up the mix here so you can see that. But as you can see, this lead vocal here, this is the lead one, it is just simply panned in the center. It's got a few things on it, like a Pro EQ, a compressor, limiter. I'm not going to explain what those do, but it's just panned in the center. And then, as you can see, there are a bunch of vocals that are panned all over the place. Generally, what I do is I'll have the lead vocal panned in the center, and then I'll have a high octave panned to the right, and then a low octave panned to the left. this creates a pretty big sound. Sometimes I'll even double up and I'll have another low vocal pan to the right and then another high vocal pan to the left. I don't always do this, it depends on the song, but that's something that I do pretty frequently. And so it creates this big sound. And if you're good at harmonizing and you can do like a fifth harmony or something like that, that's also something you can play with in terms of panning. And something I would recommend because it makes your music sound even bigger. It's very nice. But I'm not good at harmonizing, so I usually just do octaves. The other thing I want to talk about with regards to layering is guitars. This is my biggest area of competence, as I have the most experience playing the guitar and the most experience writing guitar-related music. So, we are going to go ahead and just look at all of these guitar tracks here. So, we'll start from the beginning of the song. This is just that lead line at the very beginning. This is another thing to note about layering before we move on. There's these little things that you can add to a song that I like to just call flavors. They're not really super important, but it adds a lot to the context of the song. So, let's go back to the beginning. And let's mute this right here. It still sounds good, you still get the idea of the song. However, if we add these back in, there's that little low rumbling sound. This creates an extra layer of tension and improves the dynamic of the song. So, we'll go back to the beginning and I'll let it play through all the way this time. Okay, so that's the intro of Aeromancy. But as you can see, there are a lot of guitar tracks. So let's start breaking this down. So these are the two main rhythm tracks. I'm going to go ahead and solo these. They're just playing the same thing, nothing too fancy. But I also have 4 other guitar tracks playing the exact same thing, all with different tones and different sounds. So I'm going to layer these 2 here, called E.G. small gain. Or solo these 2, my apologies. These act as more of a thickener. They're not really quarter the tone, but they thicken up the sound, make it sound really big. And that's something important to note as well, is proper panning of various guitar parts. And if you have multiple guitars playing the same thing, it's a good idea to change them tonally. And so let's go ahead and grab these here. These are the 5150 tones. Very fizzy sounding. But if you play all of these together, it sounds nice and big. Right? Now, I believe this lead mid right here is just playing the same riff but an octave up. A little bit sloppily, but that's fine. But yeah, it's also utilizing an octave. It's panned to the center. It's pretty quiet in the mix, but it adds a little bit of extra flavor to the overall sound of the song. And then you also have the bass, I don't remember what my bass tone is for this song, so I apologize if it sucks. Really sloppy on that. But yeah, you get the general idea, layering all these different sounds in different parts ideally. Let's see. You go a little bit forward here, and you'll notice there's also this lead mid part here. I don't know why I'm lazy when it comes to my naming schemes. I need to work on that. But you'll notice it when it comes in. So that that's just panned hard to the right, if I recall. Yeah, that's just panned hard to the right, and it's just the simple little riff. But it adds so much to that part in building tension for the verse when the vocals get introduced. So that's a good example of layering various guitars together. Now let's talk about the bass a little bit. This song, I don't know exactly what the bassist is playing in the original song. Knowing the band, it's probably something super technical and difficult that I couldn't be bothered to learn. So the bass in this song is just following the rhythm guitars. Ideally, what you do in terms of songwriting is have very interesting parts for every instrument. This creates a lot more dynamic ability within your song, and it creates a better sound overall. It's something I'm working on, something I'm not great at yet, but I am working towards it. So, let's go ahead and jump ahead here towards the second chorus. Right about here. This is where the song gets big again, and this is also when Rachel's vocals, she did some vocal work for me here. This is when her vocals get introduced. Now we see the price you pay for what you say. When you fall away, that's the price you pay. So I soloed Rachel's vocals there for a second or two. All her vocals are there for in this chorus is just to add a little bit of extra haunt to the sound of the chorus. That's a little bit of extra flavor. Another example of, I'm just gonna coin it layered songwriting. Though obviously I did not write this song, but stuff like that, you know, you can kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Just adding all these layers and textures to the song that aren't key to the general idea of the song, but add so much extra flavor and nuance to the song. Let's go to the breakdown and the guitar solo. So this is after the second chorus. So, something you may have seen, based on looking at all these tracks here, is that a lot more guitars are playing this part. And that's because I have these thickeners here, what I just so aptly titled EG L thick and EG R thick. And all these do, these are just a small low gain tone that just adds a little bit of extra oomph to this part because it's such a big and powerful part of the song. So I'm going to solo these two, and then I'll slowly bring in the rest of the guitars as well as the entire ensemble. So, yeah, that's that breakdown part. And then we get into the solo. So I'm going to solo the guitar as well as this piano track that only has two things on the entire track. So let's grab that and let's grab that. So, you may have thought that build-up into the solo was guitar feedback, but it's actually a piano that's just playing, I think it's a C sharp. It's just playing a C sharp minor, and it's a reversed audio clip. It almost sounds like guitar feedback. That's another cool little trick, is taking piano and reversing the audio. So you get the, I think it's called a transient, at the end rather than at the beginning. And so that's actually a very common trick. I didn't come up with this. I think this is how Roundabout by Yes starts. So if you listen to that, I think it's an E minor piano chord. So you've got that, and then that takes us into the solo, which I think I did a really sloppy job, but it's fine. Yeah, rather sloppy. That's okay, though. We're not perfect. But one thing you may notice if you listen to the guitar solo in context of the rest of the song is the guitar solo is actually kind of low in the mix. And this wasn't to hide my mistakes or anything, by the way. This was because it just sounded better. A little bit lower in the mix because where you're playing already pops in the mix. So let's take a quick listen. So even though it's at a lower volume, it still pops really well and you can hear everything that's being played. And so that's something to keep in mind is the feature of the part in the song doesn't always have to be loud. And that's just a key of great songwriting. Props to Dorje on that. The solo pops even if it's quieter than everything else in the mix. So that takes us to almost at the end of the song, and at the end of things that I wanted to talk about. Let's go and grab the drums. So unfortunately, I don't have a drummer, and hiring a drummer is expensive and takes a lot of time. And I am not proficient enough at drums to record my own drums, so I use samples. you gotta do what you gotta do. That's all I'll say on the matter. But let's grab these drums. Nothing too crazy happening. The original song has really cool drums, so I highly recommend checking it out. I'm mostly just copy-pasted the best I could with samples. Let's start at the chorus. So, that's a basic idea of the drums. How you mix the drums is entirely dependent on the song. I've found that some of my favorite ways to EQ drums just doesn't work on some of my songs, but others it works perfectly. It all depends. I tend to go for a lower range in the kick and then a little bit of poppiness in the snare. But it's all about the kind of music you're making and how you want it to sound. Alright, and finally for this song, we're going to talk about the vocals. I touched on them briefly earlier. However, I have a few more things I would like to say. Look, I'm not a vocalist. I'm not a trained vocalist. I would really like to hire a trained vocalist. But you gotta work with what you've got on a budget. So, Studio One Professional, I believe, comes with Melodyne. So I do use Melodyne in my vocal tracks. Nothing crazy, nothing spectacular. I get the best take I can pull off by myself, and then I use Melodyne to make things sound a little bit cleaner. If it's like a few cents off, then I usually don't worry about it. But if it's quite a bit off, then I might Melodyne it a bit. But it all depends on the song and how well I can sing it. As far as the biggest tip I have, start somewhere. You gotta start somewhere to start learning. You don't have to be excellent at it. I'm not. But you gotta start somewhere. You gotta get practice in, so that way you can get better. That's probably the biggest tip I have. And while I'm not using one of my own songs as an example, I hope that this was helpful nonetheless. But anyways, that's gonna be it for this general tips and tricks video, I guess you could call it. Those are the kinds of thought processes I have when recording my music, but I'm sure there are some people who can share a lot more and do a significantly better job than myself at explaining these things and at showing off these things. And as a quick note, I saw a recommendation from Joe as well to do tutorials on how to play the songs. That's not something I'm probably going to do, at least until I start releasing my own music. So once I start releasing my own music, then maybe I'll start putting tutorials out for those songs. But for songs written by other artists, I'm not interested in breaking those down, mainly because there are other fantastic YouTubers that do a significantly better job than I would. And so I would recommend just looking up like Guitar Lessons 365, Chris Zupa for solo lessons. Those are great. But other than that, thank you so much for the suggestion, Joe. I hope this was helpful to you, as well as others. I'll talk to you all in the next one.